All right, welcome back to America's Voice Now. My name is the cynical Michael Evans. I know I'm probably disappointing the listeners today because I'm so frustrated. And I recognize that I'm not giving you good information because I am so disgusted. I'm not sharing, I'm flailing you verbally. So, and that's not right. Good. It doesn't serve any purpose. But I'm trying to say we must do something. We cannot wait. Go. Why are you not on?
I don't know. What were we talking about?
I don't know why you're not on. Your mic is on.
All right.
I don't know.
What were we talking about? Talk about the...
Oh, I know why. I'm sorry. I had the wrong mic on. The paper was over the top of it.
Tell me about some of what we were talking about on the break on the retirement homes, volunteering and stuff.
When I was a kid, my mom used to go out and go to senior citizen homes, nursing homes, senior citizen homes. And she used to bring us all with her. We 5 boys, right? 4 of us that were still living at home. And we were little kids. You know, my oldest brother is far older, so he was on his own. But we were little kids. And 3 or 4 of us or 2 of us would go with her. And she would go to these nursing homes. And she kind of looked at it like it was a little bit of a ministry or something, I guess. And
Not a bad thing.
And she would go to these old people's homes, retirees' homes. And she'd bring a basket of fruit. Just some oranges and bananas and apples and stuff like that. And she'd go in there and she would go around and pass out, you know, fruit to these people and just say hi and, you know, entertain them with a little conversation. Because they're bored to tears. They're sitting in the day room all day long watching these idiot channels. And they're bored. And they have no source of mental stimulation. They have no outlet for their intellectual abilities. Many of them, their bodies are failing them, but their minds are still sharp. And they're, you know, it's kind of an empty existence, right? Your family is far away. A lot of them, I could tell you that a lot of them had kids that never came to see them.
Sounds like your mom was one of them doer people versus...
She was a doer. There's no denying that. And so she'd bring us with her. And, you know, we weren't really like the focal point of it, but I think the fact that we were kids brightened up their day in the sense that, you know, we do the normal antics kids do and the stupid stuff that kids do, you know. And they looked at that and said, because many of them hadn't seen kids in many years.
Right.
Their own children were grown and had put them in these retirement homes instead of, you know, keeping them at home with them because it was a way to get rid of the parent, right? Get them out of their life so that they could move on with their own agenda. I remember one fella, this is an old guy and an old woman who got married in there. He was in a wheelchair because he had one leg, and he had a leg that was cut off right below the knee. And, of course, little kids that we were, you know, we weren't politically correct. We walked up and, what happened to your leg? You know?
And it was probably the most honesty the guy had in a long time. He'd probably told you.
Well, and I'll never forget, he told us it got bit off by an elephant. And we were so young, we believed him, you know.
Then there's a big story to go along with that. Okay.
And he probably lost it for diabetes or something. But, you know, he told us it got bit off by an elephant. And so, of course, you know, wow, we had to hear the whole story. And, you know, he made up this long-winded story. And him and this girl who he was getting married to, you know, they were like 85 or something. And they were getting married. And they would sit side by side and hold hands. And he was in a wheelchair, and she would sit in this chair. And, you know, it was just like, I remember that fondly. When I think back on it now, I look back on that, and I think, you know, yeah, the place smelled like mothballs.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of the people there were really not physically or mentally cognizant. Like, you know, a lot of them had Alzheimer's, and there was one lady that my mom would go there and she'd wear these beads, you know, and that woman just loved those beads. She was literally, you know, out of it, right? but she would play with those beads for, an hour.
Right.
My mom would take the necklace off and let her hold it, and she'd play with those beads, and almost like she was praying a rosary with them,
Right.
But I remember those days back, and I look back on them kind of fondly, and I think to myself, what's wrong with going to a hospital and saying, hey, is there a kid here who, might use a little entertainment or maybe a visit from somebody, or going to a senior community like that and just going in and
sitting down and talking to people.
Just let them talk for a few minutes, or let them smile, or tell a joke. Doesn't even have to be, you don't have to be a stand-up comedian. Just something to make them, just something to split their face. Yep. Or maybe if you live near one, how about going and visiting some inmates?
Oh, yeah.
My mom used to go to, you remember a guy named Hurricane Carter? He was a boxer.
Yeah. Isn't there a movie about him?
Yeah. He was convicted of a murder or something like that and got life in prison. And she would go to prisons, and she would and my mom was 5'2", and very soft-spoken and very gentle. And she would go into these prisons and talk to these prisoners, and just as a friend, just to give them the idea that somebody out there who didn't even know them gave a damn, because their families had abandoned them.
Right.
The system had abandoned them.
Right.
Many times they'd abandoned themselves.
Right.
And, I can't count the number of times on one hand, or on both hands, that she would, get letters from these people that said, boy, you really changed the way I look at the world, kind of thing, when I get out. Now, whether or not they got out and they went right back into crime, I don't know. But the point is that, even if it just affected one person to get to think differently, right? Or
you never know when a single conversation that you're going to have is going to change somebody's life.
I use this example of a kid, a little kid named Billy. Somebody got to a kid named Billy, and got him to believe in the fact that Jesus is the Son of God, and that He is here as an example for us, and as an interposer and an intermediate for us between humanity and divinity. His name is Billy Graham, and he went on to change literally hundreds of millions of Americans' lives. I don't know who the guy was that got to him, but somebody somewhere opened his eyes.
Some little kid named Billy.
And it made a difference, right?
Yeah, some little kid named Billy.
And look at how many people have been changed by that little kid named Billy. You don't know who is affected. I'm no Billy Graham. I just hope that, somebody catches this show and says, wow, maybe I really ought to start seriously contemplating what's going on. And I'm not, this has never been, and it never will be, a show about religion. That's on you. That's between you and God. My goal is to wake you up while you're here, and to effect change that will give you and preserve for you the opportunity to have that discussion and that relationship with God, or whatever you perceive to be God.
And get out from in front of the box and do something.
Everybody goes to gyms today, and I'll tell you why people go to gyms. Because if you look back at a magazine from the 50s or the 60s or even earlier, there weren't any people that were morbidly obese, because they all worked and they ate fresh food that wasn't full of chemicals and preservatives and GMOs and all that garbage. And the simple truth is that, we're killing our own society with fast, lazy, cheap, easy, because we're all chasing I don't even know what. I mean, frankly, try to put your finger on what it is that you're trying to chase down in your life, and I bet money that you can't come up with something that's worthwhile.
I'll tell you another reason why they weren't morbidly obese. Something that I noticed the other day, my starter on my truck gave out.
Nobody walks.
And that's right. And I took it over on Missouri Avenue, and then I had an appointment up on Hoover Drive, right? So I said, I'll walk over there, okay? There's not a lot of things I think the government needs to spend money on, but locally, a few sidewalks wouldn't be a bad idea. You wonder why nobody walks anywhere anymore. There's no sidewalks. You're walking in the grass. You're walking in the street. You walk. Anyway, okay, enough.
Well, they are building bike paths and walking paths all throughout the nation. My problem is that it's for the wrong motivation. It's for Agenda 21, not because they want us to walk because it's healthy, but because they want us to walk because they can take our cars away. And, I don't have a problem with voluntary walking. I do have a problem with mandatory walking.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Right, that's the problem.
But if you're even if you walk from one place to another, if you're outside of the local downtown area here, it's like sidewalks are few and far between.
That's true, they are. All right, I want to spend. We're going to take a break because that's required. But when we come back, I want to talk about the treason of Jay Nixon, because if you're not aware of it now, the other day he vetoed the Second Amendment Preservation Act, and we're going to get into why. And he also vetoed another bill that a lot of people didn't even know about, was sitting on his desk, which is Paycheck protection. Now, Paycheck protection was the intermediate step between right to work and what we currently have, which is rule by union. And I don't care if you're a union guy and you get offended when I say this, because here's the problem. When you get offended when I talk bad about unions, that's because you got an axe to grind and you're getting greased by them. And that ought to tell you everything that you need to know, that you are no longer objective. Because the simple truth is that you should have the right to go get a job and not join a union if you don't want to, especially when they use your money in a way that you don't approve. And Paycheck protection was supposed to do that. It was supposed to say, just because you join a union and you have to pay dues and you have to be a member of the union to have the job, you have the right to say, I don't want my money going to the likes of Obama. And he vetoed that. And what bothers me about it is that the House and the Senate passed that because they said, well, we'll never get right to work approved. Well, guess what? You didn't get the interim measure approved either. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the problem with compromise in Washington and Jeff City and every other state. We'll be right back.
Delivering truth over mainstream propaganda every single day. Hi, my name is Michael Evans, and I'm your host, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m., and Saturday morning from 6 to 9 a.m. Join me daily for important guests and my unique slant on hot topics in the news. Visit americasvoicenow.org for even more news, articles, and commentary, and watch our show streaming live to your PC. Share your morning with me. Get educated, informed, motivated, and activated. America's Voice Now, right here on 107.1.
Out of 365 days a year, we celebrate holidays, anniversaries, and other important days. But there is one day you look forward to, your birthday. I wanna wish you a happy birthday. Ryan's Steakhouse of West Plains is proud to bring you the Birthday Club weekday mornings with Cooper & Company. Our daily winner receives one buffet and a drink to Ryan's. Just call your birthdays in weekday mornings with Cooper & Company at 255-0427. Brought to you by Ryan's and the Ozarks Best News Talk.
And happy birthday to you. Cha-cha-cha-cha.
That's interesting. We took a commercial break so that you guys could hear a promo for America's Voice. I could have just done whatever.
So they come up with the Second Amendment Preservation Act. Now, this is a law which...
Well, the reason... wait till you hear the reason why this traitor vetoed it. Go ahead.
This is a law which supports a portion of the Bill of Rights. So it is in support of a portion of the Bill of Rights which is attached to the Constitution.
Right.
In support of.
Right.
Okay, so you would think that was a good thing.
And declares independence for the state from the federal government, which he's the head of the state, so therefore you'd think that he would want to do that. But somebody's compromised this scumbag. Somebody has gotten to him ideologically, politically, financially, morally, ethically, I don't know. But he vetoes the Second Amendment Preservation Act on two grounds. The first is he says that the the right of supremacy under the Supremacy Clause in the federal constitution for the federal government supersedes state rights, which is tantamount to the slave saying, "You're right, I should be a slave. I deserve slavery," which is so self-defeating and self-demeaning that it tells you that there's something behind this governor's betrayal of his own citizens, the 6 million Missourians. The second issue he vetoed it under was a claim that it violated the right of free speech for someone who wants to, because there's a clause in there that says, no person shall divulge the personal information of another based on their firearms ownership. And here's the real rub on this one. This one is actually even worse than the Supremacy Clause, because that could just be stupidity. But this one is where I really get my elbows bent. You see, the real reason he did that is because he knows that he and the Department of Revenue and the Highway Patrol are guilty of that which was about to become a crime. And they don't want to pass a law that they can be prosecuted under immediately thereafter. And so there's no better example of tyranny in action than a man who refuses to pass a law that is the will of the people because he's afraid to be prosecuted by it himself. In other words, he vetoed the law to protect himself from falling underneath the mantle of the illegality of his action.
Who owns this guy? Who's backing him up in his campaign?
I keep going back to this stuff that, I've been saying that the NSA has been monitoring Americans and using that information to compromise people in key roles of power, for decades. And up until 2 months ago, everybody said I was wearing a tinfoil hat. And now the proof is out there, and they can't deny it anymore, that they're monitoring everything about you. And everybody's got a skeleton somehow, somewhere, of some kind, including Governor Nixon. And governors, judges, prosecutors. I mean, look, Binney and a bunch of other NSA whistleblowers have come out and said that they targeted specifically judicial people, judges, lawyers, and prosecutors, to get them to conform. Now, when you have that kind of information, you use it because you can manipulate those people to achieve your desired end. So when they get a guy in there who they want to prosecute, and it looks like they got enough power, or that this guy's got enough evidence to get himself off, and they got a bad case, they go to the prosecutor, and they go to the guy's lawyer, and they go to the judge, and they say, or any one of the three, or all of the three, and say, you're going to find this guy guilty, and we don't care how you accomplish that, but you're going to find him guilty. And if you don't, here's what we're going to talk about. This picture of you with somebody who ain't your wife, maybe the image of maybe this email we found about some dirty real estate deal you did and how you made money that you shouldn't have made, or you used your influence, or you accepted a bribe, or you got a cocaine straw up your nose, or you're sucking on a crack pipe like the mayor of Washington, D.C., who got reelected after that.
Hey, don't talk about my boy Marion Barry like that.
Or maybe, whatever it is, I don't know what it is. See, because by doing what they wanted him to do, he's preserved his reputation.
So we don't know who backs him up.
We don't know who backs him up financially, and we don't know what secret he's now kept under the rug, because he did what they told him to do. He vetoed the bills. And you see, it's not just him alone. This is the problem with government having that kind of information and knowledge. When people have knowledge, they will use it. It's like saying, if I could go back in time, would I buy IBM stock? Of course I would. Why? Because I know that it started at 13 cents and it's gone to $300 and it's split 50 times. And I know that I could take my 13 cents and turn it into 13,000 in a relatively short period of time. Why? Because I have the knowledge, and I can't help but use it, because I know at some point I'm going to say to myself, hey, why not? You need the money. You got to survive, right? And in this case, they use it for nefarious ends. We know that it happens. We don't know who it happens to, because when they do what they're told, then the information doesn't come out. But you see, it's blackmail, and it's like the guy says, hey, you know what? If you don't give me $1,000, I'm going to give your wife these pictures of you in a pub with another woman. So the guy hands him $10,000 in a paper bag, and the guy says, I want you to destroy the tape. And he says, okay. And 6 months later, he comes back. He says, well, I destroyed the tape, but not the only tape. So I need another $10,000.
So you think he was told to shut up and color, and they told him what to color.
Well, either that, or he's been offered a seat at the table of whatever phoenix rises from this ash of pseudo tyranny / liberty that we recognize today as the United States of America.
Do you think he's headed for D.C.?
Well, he wants to be.
God help us.
I mean, that's his goal. And our Attorney General, Koster, is such a piece of crap. He won't even file a charge against the governor because he's grooming himself for the governor position. See, everybody has got their own personal agenda. And that's the problem. That's why money in politics has got to stop. Parties in politics have to stop. And the idea of bribery and intimidation and coercion by massive information capture has to stop. You know what John Adams said? There is nothing which I dread so much as a division of the republic into two great parties.
Bingo.
Each arranged under its leader and concerting measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble opinion, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution. See, what he was referring to there was the Republicans and the Democrats basically following the party's line instead of your line. This isn't we, the Republican Party, or we, the Democratic Party. This is we, the people. It's supposed to be a government by, of, and for the people. Not by, of, and for the Republicans. Not by, of, and for the Democrats.
When's the last time we had by, of, and for? World War I?
1792, the day we signed the Declaration, the Constitution, because the day after that, they immediately started to try to rivet it apart. I mean, you want proof? In 1798, they had to institute the principles of nullification because they passed what? The Sedition Act. Now, you can't ask for something more unconstitutional than an act that says if you verbally or if you verbally berate the president, you could be thrown in prison for that. That's a violation of free speech.
Well, the Sedition Act, and then...
So my point is that the Constitution wasn't even 3 or 4 years old, and already they were subverting it.
Agendas.
You see, the best intentions of men put a document out that acted as the framework, but we forgot to keep an eye on it. I don't. That's why I say that.
And John Adams could see that all the way back then, and this is back to the level of thinking exercised by the founders.
Well, look, and I'm sure he wasn't, a perfect man either. That's the problem, because people, even with their intentions, the best of intentions, aren't flawless. And the whole idea of the Constitution is to bind men down with the chains of it so that they cannot allow their idiosyncrasies, their personal biases, their subjectivity to rule the day.
And the document is supposed to rule the country.
Because, according to John Adams, the jaws of power are always open to devour, and her arm is always stretched out, if possible, to destroy the freedom of thinking, speaking, and writing. In other words, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that arm of power is always out there trying to ensnare you.
Fox News Radio, I'm Paul Stevens. More protests in Egypt. Fresh anger just a day after at least 30 people were killed in violence over the military's ouster of elected President Mohamed Morsi.
Pro-Morsi supporters tried to move near the Republican Guard headquarters where we believe that Mohamed Morsi, the now deposed president, is being held by the Egyptian military. The Egyptian military then began opening fire with tear gas and live rounds, killing and injuring several people.
Fox's Connor Powell in Cairo. 2 Latin American countries offering admitted NSA leaker Ed Snowden asylum. One Nicaragua, the other Venezuela.
Pro-Morsi.
There are no direct flights from Moscow, where Snowden is believed to be holed up, to Venezuela, but it's possible that he could fly through Cuba to get there.
Fox's Molly Hedeberg, no word on any preconditions for asylum. This year's women's singles final underway at Wimbledon. Sabine Lisicki taking on Marion Bartley. Fox News. We report, you decide.
Visit our outstanding sponsors, West Plains Pawn, located on Route 160, about a mile past Walmart on the right-hand side. West Plains Pawn can be found on the web at westplainspawn.com. You can also reach them via telephone at 417-256-3000. The battery station at 303 Washington Avenue, right off the square in West Plains. They can be reached via telephone at 417-257-7799. They can also be found on the web at batterystation.com. My friends at Ozark Mountain Self-Reliance. Brian can be reached at 870-492-4030, and he's located at 3225 Route 62, 1/2 mile east of Walmart in Mountain Home. Make sure that you visit our friends over at Pizza Hut on Porter Wagoner Boulevard in West Plains. They have an outstanding lunch special buffet. You can have salad as well as pizza and other pasta, so you can have something tasty and something healthy. Bill Stone over at Stone Construction at 2930116. Bill Stone does remodeling, custom and new construction, light commercial, farm work, pretty much the gamut. If you're interested in doing some kind of a new project, make sure that you give Bill Stone at Stone Construction an opportunity to bid on that job. And my dear friend Mary over at Chantilly's Artisan Bakery, number 2 Evans Arcade, right off the square in West Plains. She can be reached via telephone at 255-2253. She's got the best damn bakery in 100 miles. And thanks so much to our phone line sponsor, Jason over at Wits End Classic Barbershop. You can call us on the Wits End Classic Barbershop hotline. He is on the square in West Plains. Excellent opportunity for you to get your hair cut. Get over there and visit.
We believe the better the ingredients, the better the taste to bring to you the greatest tasting pastries possible. At Chantilly's Artisan Bakery, we use organic, locally sourced, and natural ingredients of the highest quality. Every item is handcrafted and baked fresh for you each and every day. Visit Chantilly's Artisan Bakery, number 2 Evans Arcade on the Courthouse Square in downtown West Plains. Or call ahead 255-2253. Be sure to like and follow Chantilly's Artisan Bakery on Facebook.
Weather sponsorships are now available on News Talk 107.1 The Point. Get more information, email info@diamondmediaradio.com for complete details.
From the Point Weather Center, for the rest of the morning, clearing skies, low 62. Plenty of sunshine as we head to the day, the high 86. It'll be partly cloudy tonight, low 64. Mostly sunny tomorrow, the high 90. Monday's going to be mostly sunny day, high 90. I'm staff meteorologist Jim Rinaldi, and for more information, visit my1071thepoint.com.
The media is destroying itself on all fronts. It's on fire. But that's why this is called the blaze. It's a purifying fire. Stand in the flames of the truth. It will purify. And what is real will stand. What is not will burn itself out. We're happy to pick up the smoldering pieces and dust them off after they've been purified and put them all back together.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
Weekdays from 2 to 5, it's Glenn Beck on the Ozarks' best News Talk 107.1.
So Missouri's leader of the House, Tim Jones, he's a speaker. He said he wants to override the veto. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard during the course of the last legislative session where they said, we have a veto-proof majority, veto-proof majority. And what's frightening about this is the headline here, and this is the kansascity.com, some newspaper up there, says Missouri House Speaker Tim Jones wants to try to override Governor Jay Nixon's veto of the gun rights bill passed by the legislature. I got to tell you, if this House and Senate don't override this and the Paycheck protection veto and then move on and get right to work in this state, they should all be tossed out on their ear without fanfare, and every one of them should be removed, and a new crop of Missourians who will go up there and do it for free. I've had enough with paying everybody to do stuff, because the money is the corrupting factor, that and whatever dirt they got underneath their boots. And I'm tired of the lies, and I'm tired of the party role, and I'm tired of the party name and the party doctrine. You know, I don't believe in the party. I believe in the Constitution. And the Constitution doesn't specify some party as the leader of our political endeavor. I'm not voting for a party. I'm voting for an individual who I expect to do the accurate, right thing by me. And if they're unwilling to do that, then they haven't earned my trust. And if they haven't earned my trust, then I, like John Adams, say there is nothing which I dread so much as a division of the republic into two great parties, each arranged under its leader, and concerting measures in opposition to each other. This, in my humble apprehension, is to be dreaded as the greatest political evil under our Constitution, because he recognized that what would ultimately happen is that both parties would claim to be against something, but the shill here is that you toss one out and bring the other in, but ultimately their goals are the same. So the agenda always moves forward because they're compromised, because they're corrupt, and whatever form that corruption takes doesn't really matter. See, we do need a revolution in the United States of America. I want it to be a peaceful, civil one, but it has to be a determined effort. You know, Adams, he put it in the correct manner. Here's what he said, and I want you to think about this, and you can look this up if you want, but what's really important is that you understand the context of what he's saying. As to the history of the revolution, my ideas might be peculiar, perhaps singular. What do we mean by the revolution? The war? That was no part of the revolution. It was only an effect and consequence of it. The revolution was in the minds of the people, and this was effected before a single drop of blood was shed. See, the revolution doesn't happen until the minds of the people have already committed to it. And that's where America has fallen down. You're not committed to the revolution because you fear that you'll be left out and that you won't have the same position you have now. You won't have that job you have, or you won't have that seat at the table that you have, or you won't have that retirement sitting there waiting for you. Do you realize that there are literally tens of millions of Americans who don't want to see the federal government converted to a true constitutional government because they're worried about their pensions? They're retired. And they're worried about whether or not that paycheck is going to be there every month. And they're concerned about the fact that America may say, you know what, in line with this, we're going to cut spending to the bone and we're not going to pay these pensions. Because these people, in many cases, betrayed us in their daily operational function. So they're against it because it personally negatively affects them. By the same token, the businessman says, Well, if they change all the rules and they say that government can't create and maintain and support monopolies, we lose our positioning here as number one. And since my bread is buttered by being the CEO or the VP or the senior manager, I'm against it because it's going to negatively impact me. And that brings to mind the story of the men who signed the Declaration of Independence and led the revolution itself, and then crafted and drafted the Constitution. You see, they knew that it wasn't in their best interest to do that. In fact, they paid a very heavy price. And one day I'll be happy to do a show for you on what the actual prices were, because there's some history out there to be documented. But the simple truth is this. They were willing to do what was necessary for the long-term benefit of the country, even though short-term it was against their best interest.
The majority.
Well,
there's a couple exceptions.
Of course. But for the most part, you know, they put aside their own personal benefit for the benefit of the better, larger, long-term overall picture for the United States as a republic. And that self-sacrifice is the one thing that is missing in the world today. I posted this thing up on Facebook, and I want you to just peruse it when you get a chance, because this is 19 surveys that show the U.S. population is made up of totally clueless sheeple.
And manginas.
You know, even though we have more access to information than we've ever had before, the United States appears to be more ignorant by the moment. Not even by the day, literally by the second. So here's a couple of examples. Consider the evidence. There's 19 surveys that prove that a large chunk of the population is made up of sheep and clueless idiots. One survey found that 56% of Americans believe it is okay for the government to track, quote, the telephone records of millions of Americans, end quote, in order to keep us safe. Apparently, those people have never heard of the Fourth Amendment. 2. When Bush was president, 61% of Democrats considered the NSA surveillance to be, quote, unacceptable. But now that Obama is in the White House, only 34% of that same group consider it to be unacceptable.
No, it's because it's our guy doing it now.
Right.
He can use the information for our purposes.
Right. Which tells you that they're not really interested in justice. They're only interested in the abuse of power that they can bring to the table. 3, 67% of Americans support the use of unmanned drones in homeland security missions inside the United States. What's next? Will there be security robots that stand in the corner and watch us as we eat dinner with our families? Well, I disagree, by the way. I don't think there is 67% of Americans that support the use of unmanned drones in homeland security missions. I think that's a lie perpetrated on us by these pieces of human offal that sit in office. Like Obama comes out and says 90% of America supports gun control. If 90% of America actually supported gun control, we would have it. The simple truth is that most of America rose up and called their senator and said, if you dare do this, we will remove you.
But see, even if 90%, if it were a fact, and I don't believe it is, that 90% believed in gun control.
The rule of law and the principle of a republic say that it is government's job to protect the 10% minority and their individual rights from the majority.
That's right, and that's why the Bill of Rights has a Second Amendment in it, because the document, okay, you always go back to the document.
Close to a third of all Americans would be willing to submit to a TSA cavity body search in order to fly.
Woohoo!
Let me tell you something. You want to do a TSA cavity body search on me? I better be a body, as in dead. Okay? It's going to be a cadaver search. 20% of all government workers and 26% of all Obama supporters consider the Tea Party to be the biggest terror threat that America is facing. Holy smokes. 20% of government workers. You know why? Because they themselves are threatened with the concept of a constitutional government. Because they know that government is not going to exist who is going to continue to pay them and give them a job that allows them to sit up there and abuse you. We'll be right back.
The best shows in Branson are now playing at the Americana Theater. Don't miss Three Redneck Tenors, Branson's new smash hit, down-home laughs, and big city voices. It's a hilarious musical adventure that you just have to see. Also at the Americana Theater, Todd Oliver and his Talking Dogs. That's right, Talking Dogs. Hilarious comedy, great music, and family fun. A top 10 finalist on America's Got Talent, make sure to see Todd Oliver and Friends. If you want to rock and roll, check out Joseph Hall's Elvis Rock and Remember tribute. Joseph Hall will blow you away as Elvis, and his band is absolutely smoking. For you early birds, wake up with Cassandra and Friends. She plays at 10 a.m. with Branson's largest live band. Enjoy Cassandra's stunning voice and great comedy as well. The best shows in Branson are at the Americana Theater. Visit theamericanatheater.com for more information. That's theamericanatheater.com. In Branson, Missouri.
The Battery Station in West Plains is your headquarters for getting and being prepared. Natural disaster, civil unrest, personal and family protection, long-term sustenance, and most importantly, peace of mind. Berkey bottles and home-sized water purification systems, survival food, MREs, freeze-dried food, survival knives, lanterns, ammunition, military sleep system, and of course, batteries of all shapes and sizes. Take charge of your own survival and security. The Battery Station, 303 Washington and West Plains, 417-257-7799 or batterystation.com.
One of the secrets to success in heirloom gardening is keeping quality seed. Learn the basics of saving seeds July 11th at 6 p.m. at the Charles Ferguson Building in downtown Willow Springs. An expert from Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds will present information and will be available to answer questions. Mark your calendar for July 11th, 6 p.m. at the Charles Ferguson Building in downtown Willow Springs.
89.7% of Americans believe they are eating a healthy diet. I don't believe that statistic. But even if you do, 36% of all Americans are obese. So, what does that tell you? 90% of them believe they're eating a healthy diet, but 36% of them are obese. How are you obese if you're eating a healthy diet? It just goes to show you the idiocy of people who spout one thing just because somebody else gave them the opinion. They don't have their own. They don't have any real, true opinion of their own. They parrot someone else's statements and someone else's opinion because they're too lazy or too ideologically encapsulated or just unwilling to do the hard work that it takes to form their own opinion. 29% of Americans believe that cloud computing involves an actual cloud. One survey found that 42% of all Americans are unaware that Obamacare is even the law. See, that's 42% of the people that shouldn't really benefit from it then.
That's probably 42% of the people that ain't paying any taxes.
The average American watches 28 hours of television every week. I punt you back to session or episode 1 or 2 of this morning, where I just hammered the whole idea of the indoctrination box. If you're allowing 28 hours of your time to be devoted to mind bending, then I have no hope for you or sympathy. According to a survey conducted by the National Geographic Society, only 37% of all Americans between the ages of 18 to 24 can find the nation of Iraq on a map.
Yeah, but they're willing to send people over there to get
Right.
shot.
We're going to send our boys over there, but we don't know where it is. 37% of Americans can't find Iraq on a map. Close to 25% of all Americans do not know that the United States declared independence from Great Britain. Now, frankly, if you don't know that at this stage in your life, I'm almost willing to concede that you should go, move to Greenland or something.
Speaking of that, was it Greenland or Iceland where they just had that revolution and threw all those people out? Iceland. Yeah.
That's why I said Greenland, because the Icelanders won't have you.
They'll throw you out.
And there's nowhere to go. It's an island. So if you have to leave there, it's a long row to get to some other land. We are the most doped-up nation in the history of the planet. A survey conducted by the Mayo Clinic found 70% of all Americans are on at least one prescription drug, and an astonishing 20% of all Americans are on at least 5 prescription drugs. And you wonder why you don't have any critical thinking skills or any opinions of your own. Because while you are taking the psychotropic drugs, then you're watching 28 hours of television a week that has now infiltrated your new susceptible mind. According to one survey, 24% of all teens, U.S. teens, have a sexually transmitted disease. And they say that they still have unprotected sex. That's a crime against humanity.
That's people that don't get it.
Approximately 1 out of every 5 teenage girls in the United States actually wants to be a teenage mother. You know, that reminds me of those people who I used to know that when I worked for a large corporation that said, man, I'm quitting this job and I'm going to go be in business for myself. You know what? The only people that ever actually say that are the people who have never worked for themselves, because they find out after they do work for themselves that there's no weekends off, that you can't take Friday and go to the beach, that you've actually got to pay for everything yourself. You have no support. There's no safety net. As noted, 48% of all Americans do not have any emergency supplies stored up at all. Those are the 48 that will die within the first 30 days. One survey found that 51% of all Americans agree with the statement, it is necessary to give up some civil liberties in order to make the country safe from terrorism. For the 51% of you who actually think that, the terrorism comes from Washington, D.C.
Yeah,
and frankly, if they'd stop ravaging and imperialistically beating the snot out of the rest of the world, the most of the rest of the world would probably be willing to leave us alone as well. But, you know, if you keep going into the other guy's neighborhood and smacking him around with a baseball bat, at some point they're going to come back over to your neighborhood.
And what did the founders say about trading your liberty for the promise of security?
If you don't know if you don't know the Ben Franklin quote by now, you're listening to the wrong radio program, unless this is your first week or two. And after that, though, you're obligated to know these things. I give you a pass for the first couple of weeks. I don't want to kick you off before you had a chance to get your appetite whetted and sharpen your own knife. See, steel begets sharpened steel. According to a Bloomberg survey, only 16% of Americans believe the Federal Reserve should be abolished. Well, that's because that's the only 16% that know that Federal Reserve is not a federal agency and that it is about as federal as Federal Express. See, only 16% of America actually knows that the Federal Reserve is a private cabal of bankers who are drinking and eating our substance.
What's the percentage of people that are 35 years old and still living in their parents' basement?
Too many. I don't know. 29% of all Americans cannot recall the name of the vice president. In 2008, the American people voted to send Barack Obama to the White House. After 4 years of watching everything he did during his first term, the American people turned around and gave him another 4 years. So essentially, basically, we put the Titanic into reverse, backed up, and then ramming speed drove it right into the freaking iceberg for the second attempt. As a nation, we no longer seem to care much about what the U.S. Constitution actually says. When our politicians tell us they want to ignore large sections of the Constitution, we just shrug and go along with it. And we have completely abandoned the values and the principles that this country was founded upon. Our society bears little resemblance to 18th century America, and we like it that way. We like to think that we have progressed far beyond where they were. But the truth is that our country is coming apart at the seams all around us. I could have written this. That's a phrase I use all the time. We're coming apart at the seams. Like a cheap Chinese suit in the rain, where the thread melts. Suddenly a whole sleeve comes off, right? Oh, man. And in this day and age, it is imperative that Americans learn to think for themselves. Way too many Americans are just like sheep. They just blindly follow the herd.
You ever seen that website, the people at Walmart?
Yeah.
It's like people go out in public like that, and it doesn't.
They have no shame.
While Walmart doesn't have greeters anymore, and I could never be a Walmart greeter because people would walk in the door, and I would go, "Did you look in the mirror before you walked out of your house?"
Really? When I used to work for large corporations, they always had a full-length mirror in the men's room.
And there's a reason for that.
And they would say, and there was a sign on it, check yourself. Because it's how it's the aura and the way in which you carry yourself. And if you walk around and you are 300 pounds and you are in Lycra spandex, something's wrong with that.
But that does say a lot for the tensile strength of Lycra spandex.
You can suspend bridges with that stuff.
I mean, there's people that would walk in the door at Walmart, and I would just have to go, "Oh, ma'am, ladies' beauty salon right down there on your left." Okay,
right. I think it would actually have to be you're violating the dress code of humanity.
Oh yeah,
and you need to turn around and go cover up that oozing flesh that's escaping out of your clothing.
And then some people would come in the door, and I would go to liquor stores right there. Oh my gosh!
The only maxim of a free government ought to be to trust no man living with power to endanger the public liberty. I'm going to leave you with a couple of quick thoughts. And then we're wrapped up for the day, and I'm going to try to go home and sleep the rest. I think maybe I need to drink a bottle of NyQuil today and just sleep through the rest of the weekend. And maybe on Monday I'll get up with a fresh new approach because I'm so jaded of late that I know this has been a very difficult show for me because I feel it. I feel the frustration, and I actually feel like I have not done a great job trying to educate you guys today. Instead, I was so frustrated and angry that I flailed upon you. And that's not helpful, I guess. And even my staph infection over here, Mike and Fast Eddie, were kind of, I think, trepidatious.
Oh, what a good word. They'll have to go look it up, though.
You got to go look up trepidatious. I don't want to do like Bill O'Reilly. Here's your word of the day.
And because we just passed the 4th of July, if there's anybody out there that doesn't know who the bonus marchers are, go look it up. Go on to YouTube. There's a great video that was a documentary done on the bonus marchers in 1932. If you want to know what your government is capable of, look at what your government did to the bonus marchers.
You've been listening to America's Voice Now. I am your cynical, worn-out, frustrated, tired, and sometimes abusive host, Michael Evans. You can catch America's Voice at americasvoicenow.org. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And you can find this and every other show, although today you probably don't want to go watch these again, at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. I will be back Monday, and I promise you, even if I have to flail myself into a better mood, I will do so. Enjoy your weekend, folks. Thank you for spending your morning with us. I appreciate you. I really do.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is
KBMV Birch Tree is the Ozarks best news talk 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.